Hey everyone, today we're talking guitars and specifically how I record my guitar tracks in Logic for my music. I personally do not ever use an amplifier or have to mic up an amp or anything in my music room. I record all of my guitars direct, straight into my computer through an interface, and then use amp simulation software to create my guitar tones and everything. So I've had a couple of people ask me about kind of how I do this and how I make my tones, and I get a lot of people asking what amps I'm using, and some might be surprised to know that I don't use an amp when I'm recording ever. It's all just straight in, and I use some amp simulation software and get some pretty good results. So there's two types of amp sims that I'm using. Logic and GarageBand actually come with a really great amp simulation software that you can use for a ton of different great sounds. The other one that I use probably a little bit more often is a program called Guitar Rig, and it's made by Native Instruments. And I'm using Guitar Rig 5. There is a number 6 version that's coming out very soon if it's not already out by the time I'm recording this. And that one, I mean, both of them have a ton of very famous amp styles, and they've got a ton of effects and stuff loaded in, and they're pretty endlessly tweakable, as you'll see. So really quick, we'll jump over to Logic, but before we do that, I just want to talk about the gear I'm using really fast here. The first and most important thing, obviously, is the interface, and the one I'm using looks like this. It is a PreSonus AudioBox USB 96, which is very inexpensive. I think they're around $100. Simple 2-input USB interface. You'll see we've got two inputs there. They're combo jacks, which means you can either plug an XLR cable for a microphone or a 1/4-inch guitar jack into them. So like I have my microphone going into channel 1, I have guitar cord going into channel 2, and that's it. Everything else is done internally in the program. The other thing is a guitar, and that's pretty self-explanatory. So let's dive into it. Let me pull up my Logic window. I'm going to close this, and I have a project already started here. So we can see track 1 is my mic. I've made another drum loop here, just a simple loop that we can play along with. And this is actually something I want to highlight. This is one of the big benefits of recording guitars direct as opposed to miking up an amp and doing it that way. One of the things about recording and mixing your own music is that the way a guitar track sounds on its own might not be the best sound for the song. And what I mean by that is, like, if I'm recording something and I'm recording a riff on like a Marshall amp preset and I have that tone dialed in and it sounds great, a little later down the road I might be mixing the song and realize, well, maybe that wasn't really the sound that I wanted. Maybe it's too distorted or it's too scooped or whatever. If I were doing this traditionally, I would have to not only have a different amp, like if I wanted it to sound like a Vox or a Fender amp playing instead of a Marshall, I would have to have that amp, and then I would have to set it up in my room and deal with having a nice mic, figuring out how to do mic placement. I would need to have it really loud, which in my home studio is not really set up to do really loud recording and stuff. So and on top of all that, I'd have to just re-record the track, whereas in this case, I have a dry input signal going from my guitar directly into this, and then I have a totally clean signal in the program, which I can then just tweak within the patch. I can load up a Fender or a Vox or whatever, and it's really easy to use. And for this type of music production, it's so much faster and so much cheaper, and really makes a lot of sense. So, we'll play around a little bit here. I want to show you both the Logic amp sim and the Guitar Rig one, and just show you a couple of the differences between them and why I like them both. So I have two tracks here. There's two ways to get to this. You can either go up to the new track and go to guitar or bass. This will automatically load up a preset with the Logic amp simulation software. I'm not doing this way because I'm running this through Logic, and I had to do some signal routing to get this to come up through the screen recording. So what I usually do is just a standard track and come down here to Audio Effects, and under Amps and Pedals you'll see Amp Designer, and we'll put that in, and right away we're going to be greeted with what the amp simulation window for the Logic software looks like, and you can see what is obviously a Vox style amp. I'm going to turn on my monitoring here. We have an amp head and we have a cabinet. And you'll see all the controls here. We also have a reverb. We have a tremolo / vibrato control, which is cool. Standard stuff like master, presence, EQ, gain. And then we have our cabinet with a microphone. And if I hover over this, you'll see a speaker diagram, and you'll see this little dot which we can move around. This is really cool because we can actually control the placement of the mic on that speaker cone, and it actually changes the sound quite a bit. Typically, when you have a mic right on the center of the speaker here, it's going to be really, really bright and kind of harsh. The further you move it out towards the edge, it's going to be a lot bassier. And then, depending on how close it is, the proximity of the mic to the speaker will control just the amount of air in the sound. So if you want a really direct in-your-face tone, you put it right up front. And if you want a little more airier, a little bit more kind of low-end fullness, you bring it back a little bit further. So let's just hear what this sounds like. This is a basic, they call it a Brit and clean setting. I'm going to turn off my mic for a bit so you don't hear like the string sounds and everything. We'll just kind of play through this and tweak it a little bit. So yeah, just on one single amp model here, we've got so much stuff that we can play with already, and it's really cool just to come up with a lot of different sounds. So we'll see down on the bottom here we can change a lot of stuff. We've got, this is our amp head, so we can change from British Combo, which is, again, their Vox. You sort of have to decipher what they're talking about with these different amp models because they can't just come right out and say, this is a Marshall Plexi. So they come up with kind of creative names for them. If we go to Vintage British Stack, this is like your Plexi. Not a super huge fan of their Plexi sound, but you'll see when we switch over to Guitar Rig that there's not all amp simulation programs are created equal, and sometimes they get the certain amp models like really dialed in, like, yeah, that sounds just like a Fender Tweed, or sometimes it doesn't really sound that good. So I kind of pick and choose with both of these which ones I like. I really, really love the Vox sound on both of them. I use it quite a bit. If we go, this is like a Fender Blackface. That reverb is really cool. A lot of fun to use. Really just bright, kind of brash Fender spring reverb sound. You can hear it has that kind of drippy sound to it. And pretty much all of these, even if the standard amps themselves don't have the effects, like the tremolo and the vibrato, all of these have that on there. So like if we go back to our Marshall one, that has a tremolo and stuff. Normal Marshall is not going to have a tremolo built into it, but it does give you that option on here. And then we can also change our cabinet too. So if we go to cabinets, we have different versions of the cabinets, and we also have different configurations of the speaker. So if we have a 212, well, let's jump over to a Tweed here because we have three different options. So this is a 112 Fender Tweed style cabinet. Here's what a 410 sounds like. Way more bass because we're moving a lot more air. Some cabinets don't sound very good with some amps, so you have to kind of pick and choose. There's a lot of experimentation here. And then finally we have the mic itself that we can change. We have like a Sennheiser 421, we have an E609, we've got like a Shure SM57, and they're all pretty faithful replications of what they sound like. And then of course we can move this around too. Lots and lots and lots of stuff to play with. So Let's say we don't want to build our own sound from scratch. We can go over here to their presets, and this is just on clean guitar. You can see these are organized by different type of preset. So clean guitar, this is all of their different presets for just like clean guitar stuff. And some of these have effects built into them, which we'll talk about in a second. So if we go to Mystery Chorus, pull this up. Oops, sorry. Let me pull up the amp thing again here. So we have what looks like a Fender Tweed head with a Fender Tweed cabinet. Some crazy effects on there. There's all kinds of these. This is like a Fender through a Leslie. I use this kind of sound all the time if I'm doing like retro, like 60s style stuff. There was a Surf one. Surf in stereo is kind of cool. Yeah, a lot of fun. Very, very fun sounds to use. Go to Crunch Guitar, there's even more. We have all of these cab driver. Oh, that one's just a head. So you don't even have to have a cabinet on there. You can just run just the head. Let's see, British Invasion's kind of fun. Let's see, Broken Up Brit's pretty cool. Love that real punchy mid-range sound, is a lot of fun. Trying to find some that aren't Vox. I use a lot of the Vox presets on this. This one's pretty cool. Indie Scorcher. Okay, now this is one thing I wanted to talk about with the Logic one. Kind of on both, but Logic Amp Sim specifically. You'll notice there is that sound, that buzzing hiss sound. Now, I don't know if this interface, since it's pretty inexpensive, it might not be the cleanest signal coming in, but the Amp Sim, especially on the high gain stuff for Logic, tends to have a lot of background noise and hiss. So what you'll see is down here, they already put a noise gate on this preset for you, and you can tweak the threshold for that. So I would recommend, if you're doing high gain stuff with this, to get that noise gate set, because without it on, it's very, very noisy. A lot of hiss. So that, for higher gain stuff, that's kind of why I stay away from Logic's Amp Sim a little bit, because that can be very difficult to work with. And then, of course, distorted guitar, this is like your really, really heavy. Yeah, and it gets kind of noisy. So if you're doing a big rock riff and don't have a lot of like quick breaks and stuff, it's not a big deal. But that is one of the things I sort of dislike about Logic. Other than that, there's a ton of stuff to play with. And if we go back over to one of these that has, let's see, some effects on it. Let's find, let's go to the Delta Slapback here. Okay, so the amp itself has, we've got a little cabinet set up, we have our amp set up and everything. Now let's check out the effects, because under here you'll see pedal board. This is the other cool thing with Logic, is they give you pedal simulation. So you can create your own pedal board with all sorts of different stuff in here, different effects, and they all sound pretty great. We have a really tight slapback delay. This is kind of their tape delay preset. You can sync or desync this with the tempo on your project. So we're at 110 BPM. You can sync it up, and then your time control here, you'll see, is in fractions of a note. And if we take that off, it's in milliseconds, just like a real tape delay would be in milliseconds. So if we want to set this a little further out, maybe a quarter delay, a little faster than that. And there's also a reverse switch, which is kind of fun if you're getting really trippy and psychedelic. Treble boost pedal is a lot of fun too. Just gives some nice top end bite distortion. Some of the other pedals I use a lot are the fuzz ones. This is like a vintage fuzz face style. If you crank that up a little bit, That one's really fun. The Monster Fuzz is pretty gnarly too. We tweak some of these a little bit here. We got like a rat pedal. This is a Digitech whammy, obviously, and we can play with. We got our mix control. We can set it real high. And then we can also bring the tune down. This is super fun. I do this all the time if I'm doing big riffs. Huge sound. I mean, you just need one guitar. You don't even need a bass. So yeah, and there's a bunch of these. The other one I use a lot is the spin box. This is like a Leslie rotary style. 60s, 70 vibes for days. It's a lot of fun. And that's pretty much it. So we can just record along. We're already set up here, and then we'll just play a little bit. That's it. I want to check my tuning a little bit. Luckily, I can do that. If we go up here, there's a little tuner. Turn off our monitoring for that channel. Brings it right up. Works like a charm. Get that A back in tune. It's winter here in the Midwest, and it is extremely cold this past couple of weeks. So my guitars have not been very happy with me. Other things here, most of these presets will come with other plugins in Logic already installed on them, like we were talking about earlier, that noise gate, the pedals, the amp. They'll put typically like a channel EQ on here, compressor. These have some extra delays and stuff like that. So that's pretty much it. You can sift through all of these to your heart's content until you find something you like. Maybe you don't like any of them. It's totally a personal preference thing. There's a few that I use all the time, namely like the Vox style stuff. I really like their Vox. I just tend to like that sound a lot for anything I'm doing. So let's say we don't want to use Logic. We're going to jump over to Guitar Rig. I've made another basic track here, and we'll go down to Audio Effects, Guitar Rig. I already have it there, but I'll find it under Audio Units. It's under Native Instruments. Go here. This is what Guitar Rig looks like when you first open it up. You see a big blank window here. On the side, we're going to see some presets. We have 3 tabs across the top. There's presets, components for if we want to build a rig from scratch, which I can show, and then options. This is just like tech nerd stuff. I don't mess with that. So presets. You're going to scroll through here and you're going to see close to 500 presets that they've already made with different amp models, with different effects and stuff, and it's a little overwhelming at first. You can go through these, and some of them are pretty easy to figure out all the Blink things. Blink 182, right? Okay, and then they have like, where was the one that I saw in here? There's like an Angus Young style one. Yeah, Black Angus lead. So, okay. Back in black, right? But maybe this is a little daunting and you don't want to try and find the one. When I first got this program, I think I spent like 8 hours going through all of these and playing a little bit of each one. Some sound awesome. Some I'm like, who is ever going to use this? It's completely out there. But if you don't want to go through the huge pile of these presets first, you can actually organize these by a lot of different attributes, they say. So if I want to search by guitar amps, you're going to see a list of each amp that comes with the program. And we got some pretty clever names here like AC Box, that's their Vox. Citrus, like for an orange amp. Gratifiers like a Mesa. We've got a high watt clone. We've got a couple of different plexi styles. I like this jump amp a lot. This is modeled after a Marshall JMP, which is like the AC/DC amp, like 70s Marshall. They have like a JCM 800. We have a couple of Fender models here. This is like a PV 5150 Van Halen style amp. So this jump amp style I like a lot. So we can look at all of these different presets here. We've got, well, let's just load up this Angus Young one. And we will, whoops, turn on monitoring for this. That's not the note. Anyway, point proven. It sounds great. It's a little hot in the mix here. So still some background noise. We're hearing some buzz, a little bit of hiss. I think probably it's that I don't have a super clean signal coming in, but we can use a noise gate again, and I think for as high gain as this amp sounds, it's not as bad as the Logic one. So I tend to use this quite a bit. But maybe we don't want to mess with this. Maybe we want to make one on our own. So we're just going to drag all this off, and then we're going to go to components, and we'll see each individual tool that they have here. So if we open up this drop-down panel for amplifiers, we have all their different models. Here's your Vox. You can see these with a little more detail here so you know which is which. Citrus, clearly the orange. This is one of the ones I don't like in this program very much just because it sounds so dark. Let me mute this so you can hear what it sounds like. I've tried to use it before and it sounds kind of good on its own, but in the context of a mix, it's very just kind of big and tubby and like bass heavy and like doesn't cut through very well. So I tend not to use this one a whole lot. Other amp sims have gotten this great, like the Amplitude amp simulation software has a great sounding orange preset. I just don't care for this one as much. I love the Vox. I love, like I said, this JMP, this jump. So when you first grab one of these amps, one of these amp heads here, you'll see it pulls a cabinet with it. So we have our head and a cabinet, just like for the Logic simulator. One thing that is different in Guitar Rig is that these controls will actually mirror what a real one of these amps will have. So we don't have a tremolo, we don't have a reverb on this, because the old 70s Marshalls didn't have any of that stuff built into them. It was just a master volume, a preamp or a gain volume, and then some EQ and a presence knob. It does have a high and a low switch, so like these old JMPs had a high and a low input, so the low one is a lot quieter. Great AC/DC out of the box crunch. Down here in the cabinet, we can change a few different things. This is mic style. So basically it looks like a Sennheiser 421 and an SM57, I think. And we can blend between the two of those. And I'll show you what the difference between those two mics sounds like. So that's pretty cool. And then we have dry and air, and this is essentially like the proximity of the mic to the speaker, like we were talking about in Logic. So dry is like right up on the grill cloth, and then air is pulling it further back so you can hear some room noise. It's just like a super, super tight reverb sound. We have a volume. So each of these amps have a different like output level. So depending on what cabinet you use, maybe if we're using like a tiny little Fender style cabinet, it's just going to blow the input meter on that, and it's going to kind of clip a little bit. So you have to adjust these a little bit. But what we can see on the matched cabinet setting is we can go here and mix and match any cabinet that we want. So let's say we want a high watt cabinet. Totally different sound. Let's see, one of the more kind of crazy sounds is if we go to like the Tweed Delight. This is a little Tweed amp. Pretty cool sounds. But this is a little limiting because it only gives us 2 mic choices. So what we can do is come down to the cabinets and you'll see matched cabinet. If we pull that in, that's just going to bring up another cabinet just like that, which we can change. But if we want to get a little more in depth with it and really tweak it, we have Control Room and Control Room Pro. So each of these give you a lot more control over your cabinet. Let's bring that down just a bit. So we can toggle through a bunch of different kinds of cabinet styles, even a DI box. They've got some base cabinets, ton of different stuff. We just click through these endlessly. This one's cool because it's like a 70s basket weave with like greenbacks style of cabinet. And then we have different mics to choose from as well. We got a ribbon mic. This is another Sennheiser 421. Looks like another ribbon one. Just a few different types here. This is our speaker cone placement. We have room control here. There's mixers, so you can pan it left and right, and then we can even set up multiple cabinets in these different slots. The regular control room is kind of the same thing, but with this one we can even have multiple mics going. This has all their different mics available, and then you can blend them in. We can also toggle through different amp models and stuff. So most of the time I just stick with the matched cabinet. I think it sounds pretty great. You can play around with different ones if you want. Here's all of their effects. Again, just like Logic, instead of having them on the pedal board, they have them all here. And one thing that's important to note about the way this program works is depending on where you put the pedals in the stack here is going to change how they sound in reference to the tone. So like if we take a delay, for example, we'll just do the delay man one. Typically your time-based effects you're going to put after your amp. It's going because you want to delay the amplified distorted sound. It's just a much cleaner sound, and that's typically how they do it in a studio. A lot of times if you have an effects loop on your amp, you'll put it in between the amp head and the cabinet, and it sounds like that. Now, what we can do is put this in front of the head, and this is going to be like if you plug your guitar into a delay pedal and then that goes into the front of the amp. And it's going to sound a lot different because what we're doing now is we are distorting the delayed signal instead of delaying the distorted signal, if that makes sense. And it works with all the different effects. In fact, like if we look down in distortion here and we put a tube screamer in, you're always going to put a tube screamer in front of your amp because that's how that pedal works. But with this program, you could put it after the speaker and it changes the tone a lot. And actually one of my favorite tricks to do with this program is take like a fuzz pedal or like even their rat type pedal to get a really crazy, like super biting, bright sound, is put it after the amp and crank up the volume a bit here. And it gets you this really just kind of blown out speaker sound. This is kind of one of my secret weapons when I'm doing like guitar recording and mixing and stuff, especially if I'm doing like leads or just like I want something to just jab right through the center of the mix. It gives you this really, really aggressive. And I hear this sound a lot in like kind of modern rock stuff. I know like Queens of the Stone Age, in their more recent albums, he uses this effect a lot. And on its own, it sounds really harsh and really biting. But when you've got like big bass and big rhythm guitars filling out the mix, having that sitting on top, you're going to hear all of the notes crystal clear, and it blends in really well, actually. So this is a trick that I use a lot, is putting a distortion after the amp. Because if we bring it up here, it just kind of sounds like a normal amp. It smooths it out a little bit. But it's just a totally different sound. One other thing, there's a little drop down here for each one of the pedals, and I think even for the amps too, where you can go in and change like really detailed stuff like sag and variac. Like you can change voltage levels with this. I never do that because that's just wasting my time with an infinite amount of options. But sometimes I play around with, there's this balls knob on the cat pedal, and if we turn that up, oof, like if you're using headphones for that, there's a significant amount of balls that comes into that tone. So it's pretty rad. That's all I really got to say about that. So let's just play a little bit here and I'll just kind of show you how it sounds. Let's come up with like a little riff. Okay, that works. Bring this down a little bit. Get that out of the way. So, let's get our standard riff here. Okay, that's great. Now, super standard trick with a lot of modern rock production. I'm going to bring this down so it's not totally blowing out the drums so much. Hard pan left and right. So our first track, we're just going to hard pan down there. And then I'll come up here to other, go to track with duplicate settings. And that's going to load me a brand new track that is going to have the same guitar rig preset already set up. And we'll make sure to turn off our monitoring so we only have one track monitoring at a time. And make sure this is going through. Yes, okay, that should be coming through. And then we will pan this one hard right, but first I'm going to record along with the first one, and we'll hear how full that sounds when we have two tracks in stereo. Okay, that is some meathead riffing. Not very intelligent, but it works for the sake of demonstration. So, just wanted to put a little bit of that chugging palm muting rhythm in there just to show you that these plugins sound pretty good for just about any sort of type of playing. Depending on which preset you're using, of course, some of them are definitely voiced a little bit more for doing palm muting and stuff like that. So that's why I like this Jump JMP preset, is because it sounds good for big chords and low rhythm stuff. So let's double that up with the other track. We'll move this over to the right and we'll just hear how that sounds. Okay, cool. Let's listen together without the guitar string noise and hear how it sounds all together. That sounds really good. Let's build another track and we'll just put a simple lead over this. I'll just kind of noodle around a little bit, and I want to show you that trick that I was using a little bit earlier with that that rat distortion trick and kind of how it fits into the context of a mix. So we'll go down here, this, and for the hell of it, let's just change our cabinet. I like going, another trick for like solo stuff is using a small Fender Tweed style cab. It just focuses the sound a little bit more, gives it more of a punchy mid-range. And while we're at it, why don't we just put an AC box, a Vox AC30 style on here. Play with this filter knob a little bit just to take some of the super harsh sounds out. And it can get pretty squelchy pretty fast, so a lot of times I'll bring the distortion down too. Play with our mic placement. Bring our output up. let's maybe put a little delay on there. Let's see. I don't want to use that one. I'm going to use this. And we can go down here and we can again sync this with our tempo. Cool. That sounds kind of neat. We'll put that up the center and we'll just play along with our riff here. I'll bring these down a little bit more. So, really gritty, but it cuts right through the mix, and I just like that sound. I mean, that might be a little too messed up for some people. Like, you might like a smoother, more traditional sound, and you could definitely get that. But for me, I really dig that, just kind of gritty, like just grinding solo sound. So, and then we can go in here. Let's move this window back a little bit, give ourselves a little more room. Maybe pull down. I think both of these have a little bit too much output. So go into here. And that's another thing. Let's say maybe you recorded it a little too hot into your mic or your amp was a little too loud. All I have to do is just bring that down a little bit. Same thing with this one. Pull that up, bring down our output. Yeah, I'm digging it. I mean, it's a very, very fun thing to experiment with and play around with. So I'm going to jump back over to my main camera here, and I think that's where I'm going to stop it. I know I tend to make these videos way longer because I just kind of ramble on and on and on, but I just kind of do this on the fly. So if you have any questions, please leave a comment. Let me know. If it's, I will try and answer as many questions as I can. If it's something that takes more than writing a comment to respond with, I might make another one of these videos. Likewise, if there's something specific that you want me to talk about, I mean, I love doing this stuff. It's a lot of fun to talk about different recording techniques and stuff. Hopefully this has been informative. If you didn't already know all this information already, I just think these days making music is so much more accessible. Recording your own music, that is so much more accessible to everyone, and you can do it for not a whole lot of money and get a really good sound. If you like the video, please subscribe. I'm trying to do some more of these like music production things a little bit more, so hopefully you find this entertaining, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.